Okay, hello everybody. Let's get this party started. Welcome to PhotoBlab. This is episode number 58. As usual, we are very, very happy to have everybody with us. Mark Evers is here. I'm
Hi,
Spyros
everyone.
Heniadis, of course. And I see we've already got a bunch of people have joined us. Classic Mama, Emmanuel, Angela, Tim is here. Moondog9322 is here. CC Girl is also here. Christian is here. Welcome, everybody. We love having you join us.
Absolutely.
And we've got a great topic for discussion tonight, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I just wanted to let you guys know, this is how we're going to lay out the show tonight. We're going to run over the news, including our week in photography. So as usual, we want to know what you guys have been up to this week in photography. So pop your adventures into the chat for us. Hello, Sandy. Thanks for joining as usual. And we're going to do the news rundown and answer a couple questions and do the critique. And then we're going to hit that topic of discussion. And if you're not aware of the discussion topic, I'm going to go ahead and throw the link into the chat right now so you can prep for a little bit later. So this is the discussion link for later on. So let's get started with our week in photography. Again, let us know in the chat what you guys have been up to this week. Mark, what have you been up to this week besides putting beards on yourself?
Not a heck of a lot, actually. For those of you that may or may not have watched one of our older blabs, in December, I had actually won a photo contest, and basically the money was donated to a local charity for me. Plus, they also sent me a swag bag with a few different things in it, and one of the items that was in it was actually a $25 iTunes card. But unfortunately, it's only able to be used in the U.S. So I figure for next week, I'm going to give that away to one of our U.S. people who are watching.
So that's next week's show.
Yeah, not this week, next week.
Yeah, so make sure you tune in next week. We'll have a $25 iTunes gift card to give away. This week, we're giving away your choice of one of my T-shirts, not this hoodie, because this is the only hoodie I have.
It's the prototype.
Right. One of my T-shirts or one of my poster prints, viewer's choice, winner's choice. As usual, we're going to do the giveaway at the end of the show, so make sure you stick around for that. And just want to welcome the other folks that have been joining us. We've got Anthony and Vincent and Paul. Brian is here, and Jonathan and Ed as well. And Vincent's been filing applications for funding. Oh, yeah, that sounds like a hellish endeavor, which is how he described it. And yeah. Angela says she was scoping out some good landscape areas around her home, and she found one that she thinks would be good for the long exposure stuff in February. That's awesome.
Nice.
I can't wait to see that photo. Or photos. And
whatever the case is, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Christian has been doing product shoots for skincare products. That was his weekend. That's awesome. Moondog visited a local camera shop. Where did you guys just move to, Moondog, if you don't mind sharing? If you do mind sharing, that's totally understandable, and feel free to share or not as you prefer. Hey, welcome to Rob. Rob Harp just joined us. So my week in photography was also fairly quiet. Probably the biggest thing I did was get the studio cleaned up from the live shoot that we did with Angela, of course, where Otto came over and painted her. I disassembled the tech wall, which was the 78 pounds of circuit boards that I hot glued to a wall to create the backdrop for that photo and for that photo shoot. So I've got all the circuit boards taken off. I actually still have to finish taking the wall apart to get it out of there because I literally can't get it out the door as is in one piece, which is 8 feet wide by 7 feet tall. So I'm going to have to take the wall apart to get it out.
Or get a bigger door.
Or get a bigger door. And then I've got my new PC for streaming that I built that we talked about last week. It is now off of the kitchen table, and now it is in the studio, but it's still just sitting on a table. I still got to set it up. So let's just catch up with everybody else. Let's see. Moondog said near Kent, Ohio is where they moved to. And it's cool that you've got a camera shop nearby. I wish we had one where I live here in Wisconsin Rapids. There are camera shops in Wisconsin, but the nearest one to me is like an hour and a half to 2 hours away. So that's always a bit of a bummer for me.
That it is.
How close are you to a camera shop, Mark?
About 45 minutes for one of the bigger ones.
Okay.
There's a Henry's in Barrie, and there's also one in Newmarket's, the sort of the local big chain.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they exist down in the U.S., but
okay.
any of the Canadian people should know about it.
Right. All right. Let's see. Paul says he's starting to prepare for the August total solar eclipse. Good to be prepping early.
Yep.
Hello, Peter. Thanks for joining as usual. And Tim says the kid got off work early, so he's got to go get him. If he says, hopefully you can join us later, Tim. All right. Oh, it's a family-owned shop that Moondog found, too. That's nice. Really, really cool. Those are some of the best ones.
Yeah, the mom-and-pop shops.
All right, so keep sharing your week in photography if you haven't had a chance to already, or just your week in general, because we like knowing what's going on. We're going to run down the news, and this is going to be like a fireball news session. So we'll run through super fast and hit the highlights so that we can get on to the really good, fun, interesting stuff.
Yeah, I'll post the links as we go.
Yeah, okay, awesome.
I'll post the links.
All right. So real quick, just going to jump back to the chat. Anthony says, planning on shooting the Chinese New Year's parade in the San Francisco Bay on February 11th. Oh, I bet you those are some really cool photos.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah, and Vincent says, and Vincent, mine's the same way. He says, my camera shop is just a click away. All right, let's do the news. So, news item number 1, the GoPro Karma is back on sale 3 months after every unit that they had sold was recalled. If you don't remember, they were literally dropping out of the sky because they were losing power. Turns out the problem that there was a bad battery latch that wasn't holding the battery in securely. So they fixed it, and they are now selling them again, which I think is great because more competition breeds better results for us as the consumers. And DJI does great stuff, but them having competition is a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool, and I'm happy about that. The next bit is something that I'm happy to hear because all camera makers do this to some degree or another, but I think Fuji has been like the top notch in this up to this point. And what happened was Olympus was in an interview, some Olympus executives, and they were committing on record in public to improving the EM1 Mark II with firmware updates. Not just like maintaining updates like every manufacturer does, but actively making improvements, which is something that Fuji has only really been excellent at doing. And a couple of the things that they said they were planning to improve is the autofocus tracking. They were planning to improve the video shooting by adding auto ISO as an option when you are shooting video in manual mode, which is great because it allows you to set your aperture and your shutter speed, but allow your ISO to fluctuate and maintain a balanced exposure depending on where you set it with your exposure compensation. And then to enter the playback to review photos while the buffer is clearing, which a lot of people, including me, highlighted in their reviews and were kind of upset about. Because a lot of times you want to review those images. So I look forward to Olympus actually stepping up and doing that, and I'd like to see them do it with other cameras too. They have to some degree with the EM5 Mark II, but they haven't been these kind of big improvements. So I hope that trickles down to all their cameras.
Yeah, but Pentax started doing that with the K1 as well too.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. I got to take off my hat because I'm getting warm up here. I just got to... Oh, my other thing that I did this week, which was today, I got a haircut and a beard trim. Woohoo! All right. So, next, Instagram. This is interesting. I don't think it's something that I will use, but it's interesting at the same time. Instagram is beta testing, allowing everybody the ability to upload multiple photos into a single post so that a single post becomes like a photo album. And you may have noticed this on advertisements because this has been something that advertisers have had access to. However, the regular Instagramming public, you and I, have only been able to ever upload one photo per post. like I said, I don't know if I'll use that because I'm a one photo at a time kind of guy when I share, but I've also recently been thinking about trying to, because a lot of my photos, go in a set. Like I have my beard photos as an example, which I do as a series to tell a story. And I don't have a place where I share those online in a group for people to go see in sequence. So I might not. Who knows? Canon got a new patent for a new type of focusing screen that would allow for a brighter viewfinder. I was excited when I saw that they had a patent on a new focusing screen until I saw that it's not necessarily to make manual focusing better, which I would love to see added back to our DSLRs, because these focusing screens on DSLRs are horrible for manual focus. And then the last bit is also a bit of news from Canon, and then we'll catch up with everybody in the chat. And I found this to be amusing. And this just gives, drives the point home to the fact that our cameras aren't really cameras anymore. They're actually computers wrapped around cameras. Mm-hmm. Because Canon just released a free 148-page ebook, and the topic of that ebook is the 1D Mark II's autofocus system and options and how to use it. Okay, so it's 148 pages dedicated to using the autofocus options on a single camera.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. So, and a couple of rumors. Tamron is supposed to be releasing a 70 to 300 millimeter f4 to 5.6 lens this Friday, and Sony might be releasing a 400 millimeter f4 FE lens for their A series cameras in 2017 as well. Those are unconfirmed as far as I know. All right, so that's the news. Let's catch up with you guys in the chat here. Oh, Georgios, hello and welcome. And Peter says, taking photos through drones became a legal gray zone here in Sweden last year. I think it's okay. Drone photography became classified as surveillance, for which you need a permit. Yeah, you've talked about that before, Peter, and that's really restrictive, which is tough if you want to work with drones, but have to have those kinds of licenses and permits. Sandy said she's got a Hunt's camera about 5 miles from my house, but I always use B&H photo anyways. Yeah, and that actually brings up an interesting point, if I could go on a tangent for just a minute, because in our Facebook group, and Mark, if you don't mind dropping that into the chat, there was a pretty good conversation going, and shucks, I just looked at the post today too, but I can't remember the gentleman's name who posted the initial question, but he does event photography, and he has people who will want to purchase the print. And he was trying to come up with a way to zap the photos from his camera up to the cloud, over to a camera store locally that they could go buy it to. And his idea was that would provide them a venue in which to buy the photo and get people in the door to the local camera shop. And I applaud him for the idea, but I think he was underestimating the friction for a person to go to the camera store or to go somewhere to pick up a print, right? And what you said, Sandy, just kind of illustrated that. You've got a camera store 5 miles from your house, but it's easier to click on to B&H and get what you're going to get. And to ask a person that wants to buy a photo right now to later on go to a place to pick up the photo is probably never going to happen, right? The uptake on that is probably going to be less than 1%. That would be my guess. But I'd like to know what you guys think of that as an event photography problem. My suggestion was to have an on-site printer, one of those small, you could do a battery-powered or a plug one, where you could...
Canon selfie.
Exactly, that Canon selfie where you could print on demand. Hey, hello, Mo. He says, I'm planning to get an EM1 Mk II. Can you tell me what is the best telephoto lens, not pro, that I can get? He says, I'm new to Micro Four Thirds. So if you're talking about not getting the pro lens, I'd actually have to look. I have the 40 to 150 millimeter f2.8 Pro lens, and that's what I would have recommended if you didn't put that restriction on there, because it is a fabulous lens. But I'm not sure. I'd have to look at their their lenses. I would say maybe the best option, I believe they have a 12 to 100 millimeter lens, and that's not a, I can't remember if that's a pro lens or not, but I've read a lot about that lens, and people seem to really like that lens. And part of me kind of wants that lens because it would be helpful for me to shoot the MMA fights because of the zoom range from all the way wide out to telephoto versus having to have two camera bodies with the wide air angle and then the telephoto on it. But I would suggest looking at the 12 to 100 millimeter, Mo. Do you have any, if anybody else has any recommendations on that, go ahead and pop them into the chat. All right. Ed says, I've started surf photography shooting from the waves, but other than the Olympus's 300 millimeters, what would be another great alternative to shoot from the shoreline? Ooh.
That's a tough one.
That is a tough one because I mean,
I would think you'd want a long lens no matter what.
Yeah. I guess, Ed, I would ask, like, does it need to be at least 300 millimeters? Because if it doesn't, again, I'd go back to maybe that 40 to 150, but I'm guessing you'd need that 300 millimeter minimum unless you want to get something longer. And if you're talking longer, I'd honestly have to look because lenses like the 150 to 600 millimeter lenses that come from Tamron or Sigma, I don't know if they actually come in a micro four thirds mount.
I don't think they do.
Yeah.
You need an adapter, and then you're probably manually focusing, and the newer lenses all don't have the aperture setting on them, so I'm not sure how you'd be able to handle that.
Yeah. Ed, can you clarify what you're looking for in the lens? Are you just looking for 300 millimeters, but a lesser price than the Olympus 300 millimeter? If you could clarify, that would help us answer the question a little bit better. All right. Let's see. Vincent says his research finds that most cameras can have major firmware upgrades to make ISO and autofocus along with transfer to card speeds better, but they don't do so. Yeah, which is frustrating. I mean, I get why they do it. These camera companies will limit features to tier the cameras, right? Because of course, with software, they could make X camera just as good as Y camera, but then you can't justify paying, an extra $1,000 for a Y camera.
Yeah.
And that's why they do that to some degree. And it sucks, but it's unfortunately the reality of the market, I think. Angela says I avoid manual focus like the plague. Honestly, Angela, that's part of the reason I got a mirrorless camera, because with mirrorless cameras, you have the electronic focus aids that replace the old manual focus aids that we had in film SLRs, like focus peaking and digital split images and things like that.
Yeah, as long as it's nothing that's fast-paced like surfing, that would probably be difficult to do. But if you're just out like doing landscapes or even some portraits, it's not that difficult to do with a manual lens, especially like you said with the focus peaking nowadays.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Peter says the permits were impossible to get as the formalities were incompatible with drones. So in other words, they basically killed that business, which is exactly what he said.
Yeah.
All right. CC Girl says she did her mini preschool Valentine's shoot. How did that go, CC Girl? Lots of toddlers running around and crying. Why do I do this to myself? I think you just answered the question I asked. Oh boy. It had the parents behind the camera, and that seemed to help. Yeah, that working with kids can be really, really tough. And Emmanuel made a Facebook group for young artists. Emmanuel, if you want to message myself or Mark that group link, we'll be happy to share it. If people want to join his group, I'm all about the sharing and love.
Candy's losing money at the casino.
Okay. All right, so let's get into these questions, and then we'll get into the critique. So we had a question submitted to us from Robert Moon. And Robert said, I'm a beginner/intermediate photographer. And he says, I think I may want to upgrade slightly. I have a D5100 and two lenses, the 18 to 55 millimeter and the 70 to 200 millimeter. And the question is, do you have any suggestions for what to upgrade to without breaking the bank? I'd prefer a lens for good all-around use. Mark, what would you recommend on that? I know what I would.
No, that's kind of a tough call because he seems to have everything covered between the 18 to 55 and the 70 to 200. The only other option I could think of, which might be good, because again, we don't, with these lenses, I'm assuming they're just standard kit lenses and not 2.8 lenses. So the couple of options might be like a cheap 50 millimeter prime, like a 1.8, or another option, if you're, depending on what you want to shoot, if you're looking to do some portrait work, like an 85 millimeter might be an option too. Is that they're a little bit more pricey, but they're not like stupid pricey for them. So there's that sort of options if you're thinking something a little bit wider than perhaps like a 35 millimeter prime lens. But for the zoom range, you seem to have everything covered with those two lenses, unless you looking for more reach, then you might consider like a 70 to 300. And then if you got that, then you could potentially sell your 70 to 200.
Okay. I was thinking, because you're right, like the zoom range is basically covered. So
Right.
in terms of actual reach, unless you need to get like super far, like we were talking about just with Ed and the surfing as an example, then you know, maybe you need something a little longer. But I was thinking in terms of upgrading the existing lenses to something a little bit better, because my understanding is that these are kit lenses, in which case, if you want something that's all around, I would replace the 18 to 55 millimeter kit lens with a better version. And if you don't want to break the bank, I would get the Sigma or Tamron 17 to 50 millimeter f2.8, because then you've got a wider constant aperture, better glass in the lens in general, which will give you sharper photos, better quality in general, less likely to have chromatic aberration and distortion along the edges as compared to the kit lens, things of that nature. That's the route that I would go.
Yeah, the toughest thing is basically what you're saying is without breaking the bank. So, like, without really knowing what your budget is, it's difficult to really say, because for one person, not breaking the bank might be a $2,000 lens, but for somebody else, it might be a $300 lens. So.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Now the Tamron 17 to 50, you can usually pick up for around $500, and I mean, that could be breaking the bank for some people. And Robert's here. It's Moondog. And so I guess that would be the next question. Like, what is breaking the bank for you? Is it like under 1,000, under 500? Because if you can afford around 500, that's where I'd go. If it's got to be less than that, and you want like a better quality lens, then I agree with what Mark suggested in getting a 50 millimeter f1.8 lens.
Yeah, well, actually, he's clarified. He also said landscape photos mostly. So maybe even like if you want to shoot really wide and do some big landscapes, maybe even like a Sigma 10 to 20. I have one of those, and it's a nice lens to play with.
Yeah, or one of those Tokina wider angles. Like
yeah. Except that's all manual, so as long as you're comfortable shooting manual aperture, manual focus, that's definitely a good point too.
Yep, that's a good point. We got a little bit of clarification. Ed says the only thing I've seen is the cheaper Lumix 100 to 300 millimeter, or even the Olympus 75 to 300, just with the higher f-stops, which shouldn't be much of a problem. And I got to be honest, I'm not, even though I shoot micro four thirds, I'm not as familiar with like the quote unquote non-pro lenses. And so I can't honestly give a good recommendation on that. Just because or actually, I mean, they're mega zooms or whatnot, or just the other lenses in general. So really, this is kind of for Ed and Mo, but I do have a recommendation for Mo, because I asked in the chat if he needs autofocus, and he says I usually manual focus anyway. In which case, if you're looking for like a cheaper alternative. And you want, and I got to go back and double check. Yeah, you wanted something that was a little bit telephoto. Then what you could do is start looking at vintage lenses. As an example, I have a 135 millimeter Canon f2.5 FD lens, which is their old mount that they had before they switched over to the EF mounts that they use now. I got that lens for like $30 or $40. and you can buy an adapter, a dumb adapter off of Amazon for like 10 to 20, and there you've got 135 millimeter 2.5, which is I've used. I don't use it now because I have the 40 to 150, but I used to use it before I bought the 40 to 150. And outside of a little bit of extra chromatic aberration, I loved using the lens. It was really great. So I would look into adapting some of those older vintage lenses. And like I say, I definitely, because of my experience with it, I'd use the 135 f2.5 Canon FD lens. You should be able to get that off of eBay for pretty darn cheap, easily under $100.
Yeah, my dad's played around quite a bit with the older manual focus lenses when he first got his Micro Four Thirds, and once you play with them, and if you're comfortable manually focusing, then they do work quite well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Mo says he usually manually focuses, so that's fine. And when you're using,
so he's all set then.
Yep. And again, on the Olympus and mirrorless in general, you have the benefit of the digital focusing aid. So that's what I recommend. And Ed, I apologize that we don't have a better recommendation, but I don't want to throw something out there without actually knowing about it. So that's one that I have to apologize and say that I can't answer very well. All right, so I'm about to post Emmanuel's group, Facebook group, into the chat. Anybody that wants to join it for new artists, I love supporting that kind of stuff, so go for it. And Robert said $500 is not bad at all, which is excellent.
Yes. Yep.
All right, so we are going to switch into the critique because it's 6:30, and I definitely want to spend a good chunk of time on our discussion topic and go from there. One last question. Hey, Jonathan's here. Robert just asked, I like the idea of the new lens. Should I be content with the D5100?
I would say yes.
I would also say yes. The thing I always say when somebody's asking about upgrading a body is when you understand how that camera is limiting you and your shooting ability, that's when you should really start to think about upgrading. And before then, like if you're still learning on the camera, then definitely be content with it, because the D5100 is a great camera. All the cameras are great cameras. And the buying a better lens will do more to improve the quality of your images than buying a better body will, and continuing to use the kit lenses. It's not that the kit lenses are bad. They're good, but better lenses will give you a measurable, like visible quality difference that you'll see, especially
it'll open up a whole new perspective of things.
Yeah, whole new perspective. Jonathan just joined us, and we have David Heath that joined us and has a question that we'll take quick before we jump into the critique. And I just want to share Vincent's comment, which is very, very true, that color fringing is very easily removed from vintage lenses with Photoshop and or Lightroom or similar types of programs. So that's another, another vote for adapting vintage lenses. So David's question was, what is your opinion on the D700? Still a good option for portraits, or should I look at a newer model? What do you think, Mark?
To be honest, the D700, I'm not that familiar with it. I don't know how old it is or what how many megapixels and what have. But what sort of lenses do you currently have with this camera, David? That might be another option, is to, instead of looking at changing the camera, just like we already discussed, is upgrading your lenses. Perhaps if you only have like kit lenses, if you have decent lenses, then upgrading the body might be the option as well too.
Yeah. In terms of like just an opinion on the D700, I would say this. Sorry, I'm just trying to get something up and ready here that I don't mean to keep looking away. That the D700, I'm sure, is still an excellent camera. Like
he's saying it's a 12 megapixels for 2008. Okay,
which I'm sure is fine. But I also know that the D750 is currently selling for $1,600 on Amazon, which is pretty darn amazing price for that camera. So like if you are thinking and needing like an actual body versus you've got a body and you're looking to upgrade, I would probably opt for the D750 over the D700. Not that the D700 is bad, and if that's all you can afford and you need the body, then I would get the D700, because I'm sure it's fine. it was a great camera when it came out, and it may be from 2008, but it's still going to be a great camera.
Mm-hmm.
And Vincent just seconded that. He says if you can get a 700 for good money, you'll not be going far wrong. The color rendition is sumptuous.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the critique. I want to say hello to, and I might say this incorrectly, Kamar, I think. I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Kamar, but thank you for joining us.
Hello.
And Christian says he got his D700 for $600. Yeah, for $600, I'd probably get a D700 too if I was in the Nikon system.
Yeah.
Okay, I am going to switch over. Before we switch over to this critique, I do want to let you guys know that if you want to submit your own photo for critique, you can visit selfhelpphotographer.com/photoblab, where your photo will be emailed to me in a special fashion, which is important because it helps me filter it out of the mess of emails that I get on a daily basis so that I can find them, and added to the queue for critiques. And I've had a couple of requests from people to restart the Critique of the Week video series that I used to do on my YouTube channel, which I had stopped doing a little while ago. So I might start doing that again. So it'll be either here or in a video, but either way, we will eventually critique it. And on that note, let me get this thing switched around. And unfortunately, because of the way things are set up, when Mark is talking, his head will actually be frozen. And I'm going to apologize in advance for that, but I just don't have enough monitor space and room to move everything around and keep Mark active. So,
yeah, people would rather see the picture anyways, I'm sure.
Right. So this is the photo, and I am going to quickly read the details of this, and this is going to screw things up here for a moment, but let me get it set. This photo comes from Colin, and Colin shot this with a Canon 20D. That's a 20D. Okay, so this is a 13-year-old camera. And this is very relevant because we were just talking about the D700 from 2008 and whether or not it's still a good camera. Well, here's an image from the 20D. And Mark, did you share the Flickr link yet? If not, I'll pop it in the chat.
Oh, no, I didn't. Sorry.
Okay, Mark's going to throw the Flickr link into the chat so you guys can actually look at the photo without the YouTube compression and whatnot, and you can see the quality of it yourself. But this was shot with the 20D using the 35 to 135 millimeter lens, zoomed all the way out to 135 millimeters. The ISO was 200, the aperture was f11, and the shutter speed was 1/800th of a second, shot in aperture priority mode. And he says, golden hour sun, there are a lot of birds flying at the left of the main tree, and he says, I was going to remove them, but decided against it. All right, Mark, let's hear it.
I'm glad he left the birds there. Sometimes you see pictures with birds in them, and just the angle that the birds are at, they just look like specks. But in this case here, you can actually tell that they're birds. So I think leaving them was the smart thing to do. Maybe the only one you might consider getting rid of is the one on the right-hand side of the frame, right near the very edge. That one kind of looks more like dirt than a bird. But all the other ones I would leave. They look good there. I like the coloring of it. You can tell it's a nice golden sunset just because of the gold tones. I really like that. The rule of thirds with the horizon's kind of broken, but I don't mind it in this case because just because I'm not really looking at the horizon in this particular photo. I'm looking at the foreground, which is on the third. So I like the way it is laid out there. Plus this tree, the larger tree, it's also cutting into the third in the other direction too. So it's the composition is nicely done in this photo. There's something down, I'm not sure what it is, in the bottom or sort of the middle right. It looks like a lamp post or something in there. Something's kind of shiny, or somebody's antenna maybe. That could probably be quickly cloned out just to kind of clean it up a little bit. Myself, the green lens flare, I don't like it. Some people don't mind the lens flare. It'd probably be easy to clone that out as well too if you were offended by it. But again, with this, that's just my opinion. I'm not a fan of it. So take that as you will, either keep it or not, depending if that's what you're looking for. But yeah, overall, I like it. I really like the tones of it. I like the birds in it. I'm glad you left them there, and that's sort of my quick take on it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with the decision to leave the birds in the shot. Um, Initially, when I very first saw the photo, I actually thought the opposite, but that's because I saw it as a teeny tiny thumbnail in my email. But as soon as I clicked on it and saw it in full size, because in the thumbnail I could see the one on the right that you were mentioning, Mark, and the ones on the left really did just look like dirt. But again, when I looked at it the way you're supposed to, which is bigger than, the little like 1-inch square thumbnail that you see attached to your email, love the birds. You could take that one out on the right. I actually don't mind that it's there. I like that it's there, in fact, because you've got a lot of directionality in this image, right? You have the sun up in the sky in the upper right, and that pushes you, that's kind of like a starting point because it's so bright, and that pushes you down through the image to the left. And you go that way for a couple reasons. One, you have the zigzagging of the landscape that moves back and forth in layers. So that energy and that motion complements the direction of the sun cutting across that at an angle. So I feel myself moving down there, and the birds sort of echo that, not quite as a dramatic an angle, but you have the far right bird, and then the one just slightly to the right of the tree, and then you have these other birds over on the left. And so you have all of this leftward movement in the image that I really, really enjoy. The tree right there, I think, is fabulous. I love the angle here, because if you shot this higher, like if you were at a higher vantage point, then a lot more of the upper part of that tree is going to be in front of the landscape, and you won't get the bright sky shining through that. So I like the way you can like see those branches highlighted by the sun and the light shining out of the sky. I have no problem with the lens flare, but I can totally understand that it's not your favorite thing, Mark. Some people do, some people don't like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think the settings and the exposure overall are spot on. Some people might say that it's overexposed because of the hot spot up in the sky, but it's the sun, and it's meant to be the sun and this big, big, bright thing. So I'm totally okay with that, especially because of this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful drippy, warm haze across the entirety of the image. I love that. The way the whole image feels like it's in this blanket of sun just makes me feel warm, and it takes me to this place in a very powerful way. So I really, really enjoy that.
Yeah, I'm assuming, looking at this, that it's a morning golden hour versus a sunset golden hour, just because the fog and the mist is still there.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Honestly, the only thing, if this were my image, the only thing I would do is take out that electrical or telephone post that you mentioned over on the right, Mark. The way that catches the light, it just ever so slightly breaks you out of the energy and the feeling of the image itself. Otherwise, this is a beautiful image. I think the exposure is spot on. Like I said, it was shot in aperture priority. It's a great mode to use when you're shooting landscapes. Nothing wrong with that at all, and I want to make that a point, because some people get this idea that you can only shoot in manual mode. That's absolutely not true. Well done all around, and I want to just say thank you to Colin for sharing it with us and giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts on the photo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well done.
Yeah, very, very much well done. Let's see here. I just want to check up on the comments here. I don't think you did any of mine yet. CC Girl, we've got them. We've got them. I know we've got them. I can't remember. There's a bunch of them in there. The queue for critiques is kind of big right now, so we're trying to work through them, and we're going to have to do like a full critique show again soon. Maybe we'll even do that next week. So a lot of people are loving this. Angela also loves the warmth of the colors and the composition and the layering. Yes, I love the layering of that image. Robert wants to know what caused the color circle in the foreground. That's called lens flare, and that's what happens when the sun shines directly into your lens, or any light source in general. It doesn't have to be the sun, but it
doesn't even necessarily have to be directly in. It can be from the side, and the lens hood helps keep the light from coming in and bouncing around in there.
Yes, yes. And then what happens is the light bounces in between the lens elements, and it's essentially you're taking a picture of the light that's bouncing around inside of your lens. So that's where that comes from, and that's what Vincent was just clarifying for us too.
Yeah, but some lenses are better at controlling it than others.
Yep. Jonathan's digging the photo. Sandy says she likes it. It's a dreamy photo. Would love to have a woman with a beautiful flowing dress standing there. Oh, yeah, that would be a great scene for a portrait, Sandy. I totally agree with that. It's a beautiful photo as is, but it's also a great scene for a portrait.
Yep.
Okay, Mike's here with his Nikon Rules entry point. Good to have you here, Mike. All right, let's get on to the topic of the evening. Pyro Universe says, I love the picture. Thanks for sharing. The topic of the evening, and Mark's about to share the link again. I shared this earlier at the beginning of the show. Let me lay it out here for you guys. And I want to say this. We want this to be a constructive discussion. This is a topic that some people might get a little bit passionate about. And I understand and respect that passion, and we want to see that passion, but passion doesn't give us the right to disregard other people's opinions or feedback or thoughts on a topic. So please keep that in mind while we're having this discussion. And what we have here is a photographer by the name of Heather Witten from Arizona. She's a documentary photographer, documentary lifestyle photographer. So she's the sort of photographer who goes around and will follow a family around and take lifestyle photos of them just in their day-to-day lives for the family. And she is also a wife and a mother of 4, and so she documents her own family and her own life as well. And she is being taken to court by the Child Services Department of Arizona. And what happened was she shared a photo that she took of her son and her husband. And you can see the photo at the link that Mark just shared in the chat. And I've also posted this on Facebook earlier today, so I know a number of you have seen this. It is a photo of her husband holding her 1-year-old son in the shower. Her husband is taking care of their son, who was very sick at the time, and the doctor had recommended, because of the high fever and the sickness, that they sit with the child in the shower, a cold shower, to try to control the temperature and soothe the child a little bit. So if you haven't clicked the link, I'll just briefly describe the photo. The husband is sitting in the shower. He's naked because he's in the shower. He's holding his 1-year-old son in his arms, who's also naked because he's in the shower. You see no naughty bits of any sort of any person, whether, not the father, not the child. He's cradling his son. You actually don't even see the father's face. To me, it's a touching, powerful lifestyle image. It is in no way pornographic, in my opinion, and it's not explicit. It's a father holding his son in the shower, and the photo went viral. And in going viral, somebody reported her to Arizona Child Services. Actually, what happened? I apologize. The police were called. The police immediately said, no, this is we have no business doing anything with this. We're not charging her. She didn't do anything wrong. And then Child Services got involved, and they have pursued a case against her. Now, the case against her is not criminal, but they are charging her with neglect. And if she loses the court case, she may not be able to work with children anymore in her job, which could seriously affect her lifestyle, because she's a documentary photographer who photographs people. Oftentimes, I'm sure those people have children. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the important things I want to do is frame this discussion, because there are things happening in the case that, while may or may not be right or wrong, they're not actually pertinent to the things that I thought were important for us to talk about, which is the fact that the Child Services seem to be going against the photographer in a bit of a vendetta that was spurred by the photograph, but the actions that have been taken afterwards don't really have anything to do with photography. And really what I want to talk about is taking these kinds of photos of children and sharing these kinds of photos of children, and how we all feel about that, and the legality of it, the morality of it, and these sort of things. So I actually have specific questions I want to ask to help frame this discussion as we go through it. So the very first question I want to ask, and I want to know what you guys think, and Mark and I will share our own opinions on this as well, is first and foremost, just in general, how do you feel about this image? If you haven't looked at it, please take a look at the image and just let us know in the chat how you feel about it. Outside of the context of whether or not the woman is being charged, whether or not any of this other stuff is happening, just look at the image and tell us how do you feel about the image, and try to discard all the context. And I'll let you start, Mark, with your own reaction.
Yeah, I think the image is basically doing what it's supposed to do, is showing a lifestyle photo, and I think it's tastefully done. There's, like I said, there's no naughty bits showing. It's not like it was done with the intent of trying to do anything, I guess, for lack of a better term, perverted. It's just a picture of a man consoling his son or daughter, I'm not sure which it is, in the shower, basically as per the doctor's orders. So that's sort of my quick thoughts on it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I think it's a touching image.
Thank you. I'm just putting the question into the chat so everybody can see it.
Oh, okay.
I agree. Like, I think I can see why it is a controversial image to some people because of the fact that there's a child in there, and we're going to talk about that. But I also personally think it's a very powerful image. I think it's a touching and tender image. I could immediately sense the love and the care of the father holding the child. You can see that the child is not happy. Not happy isn't the right word, but doesn't feel good and is,
under the weather.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Under the weather. The motion and the energy of the water and how they're captured, I think, is powerful. It is a good documentary / lifestyle photograph. And so I agree. I think as an image, I think it's great. I think it's a really wonderful image, showing the care of a father, showing a sick child, showing the reality of life sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. People get sick, and sometimes you got to sit in the shower, in a cold shower with your kid to take care of them. And sometimes that's what love and parenting is. And I don't have kids, but I mean, I at least cognitively...
You do it with your cat, probably.
Yeah, well, yeah, right.
you might scratch you all to hell. But...
Yeah. So I just want to share what other people are saying in the comments here. Angela says she absolutely adores the photo. It shows so much raw emotion between the father and the son. And Jonathan sees nothing wrong with the photo. He says it's a powerful image. Moondog Robert says, I like how the drops of water were caught. CC Girl says, it's nice. I'm glad Dad was helping with a sick toddler. Yeah, exactly. Giorgio says, it's a dad with his son. It's an emotional and touching photo. And Sandy says, I don't think it should be shared on social media. It's private of the moment, not criminal, but I don't think it should be seen by millions. We're getting to that.
Yeah, we're getting to that one.
We're getting to that one, Sandy. Moondog says, when babies are born, immediate contact with the mother is strongly encouraged. Isn't this a similar act? Yeah, I agree. I think in a way it is. It's an intimate contact with the parent, and that's an important thing. So we have that. And it seems, and if you haven't shared your thoughts on the photo in general, go ahead and share them. But we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the next question, because that's where we start to get into the realm of what Sandy was just talking about, although we're not quite there yet. And this is, whether or not you feel it's appropriate to take these kinds of photos. We're not talking about sharing them yet, but just taking these kinds of photos of your own children. Mark, how do you feel about that?
Well, myself, I have two boys, and actually my one son, he had a bad case of chicken pox, and we had him in the bath when he was young, and took pictures of him in the bath, basically showing off his chicken pox, and again, no naughty bits for showing or anything like that, and with it being your own children, it's just something you do. It's just a memory that you keep, and there's a reason for the pictures. Basically, in my case, it was because he had the chicken pox, and you felt sorry for him. But it's something that that happens, and he was feeling quite rough at the time. So this is sort of a similar story, except that it was only him, but you get a general idea for it. And I think as long as it's your own children, then there's nothing wrong with it as long as it's done in a tasteful manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have kids, so I've never taken a photo like this, clearly. My parents, I don't know if these photos exist anymore, just because of time. Well, the one that I remember is my parents have a picture of me in my birthday suit with my feet stuck into my dad's giant boots, laying on the floor. So, my all my little bits are hanging out, and I've got these big boots on, which were a bit of a premonition since I now have size 16 feet as a grown man. And I think, I think it's fine. Taking these kinds of photos of your own family, totally fine. Nothing at all wrong with that. This is life. And there is a clear line of, exploiting children in pornography, which is not something that we're talking about here, and taking moments of your child's life and capturing them photographically.
Yeah, family moments.
Yeah, family moments for yourself, for embarrassing your kid when the girlfriend comes over, things of that nature, right?
Yeah, well, I guess sort of a similar topic. It's a little bit more explicit, but it seems to be a trend now, is people having a photographer in the birthing room when the child is being born, and that's I guess sort of similar, but not really. That one I kind of have a hard time with, but maybe it's just because it's such a close personal thing. Like maybe if it was just the father was there taking some pictures, I would be a little bit more okay with, but I'm not sure how I feel about that one, but it's sort of the same context. A little bit off topic, but anyways.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's on topic, and I agree. I think, in my opinion, that's something that's going to come down to an individual's choice, and I couldn't care less if somebody would, if somebody says I'm having a kid and I want a photographer in the delivery room, right? And if they want to do that, that's cool. I've got no problem with that. If it were me and my wife having a child, I don't think I would want one in there, but that's going to be my personal choice. I'm not going to...
That's sort of the way I think of my personal choices. I wouldn't want it, so I just have a hard time wrapping my head around why others would want to do it.
Right. So Sandy says she agrees that it's okay to take them, and she says, I have pics of my own kids naked in the tub. Christian says, my parents have old pictures of me with the chicken pox. Angela says, these photos are the photos that most families almost need to have. It's things like this to look back on and enjoy. And 100% agree. Going back to that picture of me, naked with my dad's boots on. I don't have that picture anymore, but I remember it, and I always smile when I do have occasion to think about it because, it's a funny picture.
Yep.
Yeah. And Sandy says, kids in the bubble bath are adorable when they're little. Giorgio says, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I love those kinds of pictures. CC Girl, take the pictures. Memories of good and bad are needed as we age. They help keep memories fresh. Yes, absolutely. Matt says, we have photos of our kids in the tub. Nothing showing, but they are family photos, not for sharing on social media. Moondog says, I see nothing wrong with this photo. Not everyone, however, uses good judgment, and it's a slippery slope. Angela prefers an artful picture like this to just a point and shoot of me in a bath, right? Jonathan says, I think it's appropriate to take photos of the nature of your children as long as it's tasteful and within logic and common sense. Christian says, I have a 1-year-old. I would do the same thing. Mike took one like this of his son. He's 37 years old now, so he survived. Anthony says he doesn't find the photo offensive at all. He finds the image to be compelling in showing the strength of the father holding his child. Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. Yeah, Tim says that, this picture, there's not any bit of joy. You can see from the posture that nobody's enjoying this moment, but it's a tender moment regardless. The content is fine. If we're critiquing the quality, and that's not something, I mean, a person could, but I don't think that's something that we need to do in terms of critiquing the quality. So let's get on to the topic, and I think we're going to end up running a little bit late today because it's almost 7 o'clock, and we still need to do the giveaway, which I definitely want to do, but I do want to finish this discussion, which brings us to the next two questions, one right after the other, which is where I think we're really going to get into the meat of the discussion. Everybody that's here seems to be in agreement so far, and that, number one, the image is a good image, and number two, as a parent, taking a picture of this nature of your own children is perfectly fine. And now we get to the point where we're definitely going to have some discussion, and this is where I really want to hear what you guys think, because we're in uncharted territory here with the internet, with Facebook, with Instagram, with everything else, and that is the question of sharing. Do you feel, as parents, we should be sharing images like this of our children? And that's what I want to know from you guys. And I will share my opinion after you, Mark, but I also want to clarify that I don't have kids. So my opinion on this may or may not have merit, depending on how you guys judge it. But go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think it's a tough call because we obviously share pictures of our kids online because we're proud of them and stuff like that. But I personally, like that picture I said I have of my kid in the bath with chicken pox, I wouldn't share that. That's to me, it's more of a personal, keep it in the family type thing. Maybe use it as blackmail at his wedding type thing. But sharing in a public forum, no. I think mainly because there's so many people out there who get upset about stuff like that, and typically if I see photos like that as well, I usually just skip right by them because it's just not my thing. If it's regular family photos that you've done for somebody, that's a little bit different. And as long as the parents give you permission to post the photos, and a case like that, then yes, no biggie. But I think photos like that should remain private.
I don't have kids, so it's hard for me to express an opinion on this. Like, there's the part of my brain that says, yeah, why not? I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a beautiful photo. I don't mind seeing it. And
yeah,
so
I'm definitely not offended by it,
right?
By any stretch of the imagination. But if it was something that I just saw online and it didn't have all this controversy behind it, I'd probably just pass it by and not even give it a second thought.
Right. And like, it would depend. As an example, my one of our best friends, my wife's friend from high school, she just had a baby, and she's been sharing pictures on Facebook pretty regularly, and I like seeing those pictures. And if this were Audrey is her name, my goddaughter, she's our goddaughter, and they were that sort of a picture that she posted on Facebook, naked in the bathtub or something like that, I would be delighted, because she lives close-ish, but it's 2 hours away, so we don't get to see our goddaughter as often as we would like. And so, yeah, I want to see the funny moments. And so that part of my brain says that's okay. I don't find it to be a problem. Not necessarily with the bits hanging out or whatever, but you know what I mean. And here's the way I think of it. And I want to know what you guys think of this parallel, because it is the same, but it is also different, right? How different do you guys feel this is from whipping out the family photo album when your friends and family and everybody else comes over and everybody gathers around the table and you look at all the pictures of the kids and the family and everything else? It's different.
That's just family versus the whole internet, the whole world, basically.
Well, right. But at the same time, like you do. Online, you do have the ability to exercise how many of the people that you are connected with or who are online can see the photo, right? Like, you can restrict it to seeing, like just family. As an example, on Facebook, you can restrict it to family only, or family and friends, or friends only, or something of that nature. So there are ways to limit it and not broadcast it out entirely on the internet.
That is true.
But again, as a non-parent, it's hard for me to, I think, weigh in with an opinion that other parents should listen to, because I'm not a parent. But as a godparent, at least, and as just a person in general, I have no problem with sharing these kinds of images. Now, Christian says, yeah, it's fine. Sandy says, nope. Angela says, sure, why not? My whole family is on my Facebook, and I love seeing photos of all my family and everything that is happening. I'm over in Colorado, and my family is in England, so it's nice to see. That's a perfect example of it. And Mike says, I would rephrase the question, at what age is this not okay? And that actually leads into the next question, which is sort of two-pronged, but we'll get to that in a moment. Jonathan says, it's fine to share them based on common sense. I shared photos of my son as he grew up and experienced no issues with public reaction. Now, I agree, but here's something, right? And this is that what one person thinks of as common sense is another person's idiotic move, right? Meaning that not everybody agrees on what common sense is. And that's where I find the gray area of this discussion to be, and where I find it interesting, because, I can see the side where you shouldn't share this stuff. And there's a part of my brain that says, yeah, should she have put this out where 9 million people could see it? Part of me says no. But then again, at the same time, like, what is the actual harm to the child?
Well, if you want to look at it in one respect, obviously there has been some potential harm, because look at all that she's going through right now.
But that's harm to her, not to her child.
But in the long term, you never know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, other than, being a bit embarrassed when you get older, is, like, what would you guys quantify? How would you quantify? This is a question that I actually didn't have written down, but I just thought of it, and I think this is a really good question that I'd like for you guys to really weigh in on, especially Sandy, because Sandy, I think you're the lone no in this, although CC Girl says yes and no, depending on what the image is. So that would be the question I would have. Like, what's the actual harm to the child here? And share your opinion. I want to know what you guys think. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. The one thing that just popped in my head is the potential for a person who has pedophilia tendencies, and this is like a super ugly thing to say, could see that image and could, have
exactly
thoughts that we don't want them having in general. So there's that right there. That's one for, that's a bad idea. What else do you see as like actual public harm or actual harm that could come to the child? So let me just catch up on the comments here. Mike says, seems like an art photo, and they've been around forever. CC Girl with the gray area, and she says, most of the ones that I do share are the back of her head. So you're making a deliberate choice to keep her face mostly out. Robert says, I personally wouldn't share it publicly. Family and close friends, sure. Can't help but think it was a strategy to help boost the GoFundMe initiative. I'm not aware of the GoFundMe other than that she set up a GoFundMe to help cover the legal costs after this whole controversy broke out. And Vincent says, I think we cannot be controlled by those that abuse images. It's a form of control you simply cannot allow them to have. And see, that's the side that I fall down on. Mark, I'd like to know what you think, because that gets into who has the power. The person who sees the image, or the person who is in the image that has been seen? To me,
tough to say.
To me, the power lies in the person who is in the image. And as a parent, if you talk to your child and you discuss these things as they get older and as they're able to understand this stuff better, then they can understand the power that a picture can have, and how at the same time, like, you don't have to give that picture power if you don't want to. You know, but again, I'm not a parent, so I don't feel like in a lot of this stuff, I'm not sure I should be weighing in on it. All right. Anthony says,
it's
go
a
ahead.
tough call no matter what.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough call, which is why I wanted to have this discussion and get everybody's opinion on this.
I don't think there's really any right or wrong answer.
Right.
Like in this particular case, like, I agree that the photo is a completely innocent photo, but unfortunately, you can see what can unfortunately happen because of something like that. Like, I do look at it as an artistic type photo. Myself, I probably wouldn't post anything like that myself, but the people who want to, I can understand, because, like I said, it's not a perverted type photo. It's just a moment captured in the moment of their life. So in that respect, it's good. But then people blow shit out of proportions, pardon my language, but that's literally what I think of, is they blow crap out of proportion, and then you end up with a situation like this, and nobody needs that in their life, especially when you're trying to raise a child.
Yeah.
So you're almost bringing it on yourself in a case like this, like, especially with this one, because you almost wonder whether she was doing it to get attention for herself. But I feel bad that this has happened to her, because it's something that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, I mean, here's the truth of it. We share stuff online because we want some kind of attention.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, whether we want 9 million people to see it or 9 people to see it, you know, that's person to person, but we share stuff because we want other people to see it. Otherwise, we wouldn't share it, right? I mean, I think we can all agree on that fact. That's the nature of sharing things. So she definitely wanted attention. And as a documentary lifestyle photographer, I think it's probably fair to say that she wanted a lot of attention. Maybe not, definitely not
what she got.
Not what she got from Child Protective Services, but she definitely wanted attention because that's her business as well. So, you know, and that's fine, right? Like, I'm not criticizing that, but I think, you know, I think that's something that we can reasonably assume to be true. And I know assuming is a dangerous thing to do sometimes, but I think it's pretty fair to say that. And if I'm wrong, I will be happily corrected on that. But Anthony says, it's so easy to share our lives, but I agree with Mark. There are personal moments that should only be shared with those they were intended for, meaning, you know, family. You know, Jonathan agrees or points out as well that Facebook has the filters for making sure only certain people have the ability to see the photos. Yeah, Mike makes a good point here. He says, here's an interesting related topic. They used to take photos of the deceased at home. This was a very common thing to do, and it just shows how time changes. Georgios agrees with you, Mark, that it's a personal photo. Apid says, I'm not a fan of sharing family photos, let alone oversharing, but the photo has an artistic touch. Not just like a snap, you know, a non-artistic snapshot. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Angela says, how did she ever know that it would reach 9 million people? That's a good question, and it's fair to say that she didn't. It's fair to say...
I would agree. She didn't.
Yeah.
I don't think she expected this backlash at all.
Yeah, I go ahead, Mark, sorry.
No, that was it.
I would just say that I think she probably knew that there was a possibility that it could go viral, as we all... To some degree, in the back of our heads, we know that, yeah, we could maybe post something that would go viral. It's maybe not at all likely, depending upon who we are and what we do, but it's possible anybody could post something that goes viral. Charlotte Moon says innocence, and it's absolutely right. That's what it is. Yeah, so Tim says the harm that could come would be the wrong person seeing it, which is what I was, you know, talking about with the potential types of people. But Giorgio says it's really no harm to the child, but still it's a personal photo. And Mike and several of you agree that the social worker is out of control. Based on my reading of the stuff that's laid out there, I would agree with that. I didn't really want to talk about that because the pursuit of the case beyond being triggered by this photo and the actions that social worker has taken don't really have anything to do with the, you know, the point of discussion, but I do agree
Mm-hmm.
that my opinion is also that the social worker shouldn't even be pursuing the case.
Yeah. Grant, that being said, we don't really know all of the background behind the whole situation.
Yes.
So the odds are there's stuff that we don't know about and probably never will know about, and maybe there is a reason behind why the people are looking into it. You
Mm-hmm.
never know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Anthony says I need to parent up. um, Without going into detail, Anthony, I'm broken, so I can't parent up. So Sandy says the child should have the right to privacy. Lots of sickos take pictures like this and do unthinkable acts with it. And I mean that's the reality of the world. There are people out there that are like that. But then Christian says as a counterpoint to that, if the thought is, pedophiles, then don't even take your kids out of the house. And people will come down in different places on this. So I'm not trying to pretend, and I'd actually like to know your thought on this, Mark, and everybody else's thought, which is you have it's the same thing with like security and surveillance. The analogy would be the September 11th attack that happened in the United States, where the Twin Towers were attacked and all that stuff happened. And then you have this Patriot Act thing that the government passed, and the surveillance state with the NSA, like literally, watching every digital transaction that happens and all of this stuff. And there are people who are like, yes, do that, keep us safe, yes, right? And then there are people, and I'm amongst these people, who say, no, the freedom that we are supposed to have as human beings, and I'm not just talking about Americans, I'm talking about people in the world, to live our lives, to make the choices we want to make, to have the things that we deem to be private, and the things that we deem to share to be public. And so I kind of come down on that same side with this, where I, as a person, am okay with that kind of sharing. But I also respect that, as an example, I think Sandy here is the most vocal against sharing it. I totally respect Sandy's opinion on this and her position on it.
There is no real right or wrong answer when it comes to something like this.
Yeah, but I think
it's about being smart.
It is. It's about being smart. And I think the only answer is it's the parent's choice. That's what Angela just said. Absolutely. Now, the next question is the last question. And I want to know what you guys think about this, because this is something that could potentially have an answer through actual legal action. Which is when do you think a child should have the right to dictate how images of them are used and or shared? Because right now, children don't have any say in this, and there's a line here, right? Because there's already laws out there which are like no pornographic images of children, right? Like that's clearly illegal, and that's perfectly understandable, okay? But at what age or at what point do you as a parent no longer have the right to take a picture and share it of your kids? Is it the legal age of 18 or whatever the legal age happens to be in the place where you live? Is it when they're old enough to make that decision, which could be 5 years old, being old enough to say, no, Mom, I don't want you to take that picture of me? I'd like to know what you guys feel for that. CC Girl says the age of majority, which that would be the legal age of 18 here, at least in the United States. Like to know what you guys think. I kind of lean actually towards taking and talking to your children, and as they're growing up, respecting their wishes.
That's my thoughts on it as well. Like if at 8 years old or 5 years old, but my child had the gumption to say, I don't want you posting that for whatever reason, and the odds are that I would respect that, and that's just sort of the way I've always been. It's like, whether it's my child or pictures for a client, if they don't want me to put them out there, then I don't put them out there. It's just just the way I kind of look at it, like when they're the age, like the picture in question here, the child is obviously sick too, and hard to tell how old the child is, but the child probably isn't old enough to make a decision on their own to say yes or no about posting their picture or not. But I think as long as the child is old enough to be able to make their own decision, then absolutely, then I would respect it.
Yeah, we've got a mix of the opinions here. So CC Girl says age of majority. Peter, Moonlight Productions is Peter, says parents decide up until they are legal age. But I think you can ask a child once they are cognizant of good and bad and truth and fiction. So that's bringing me in at a younger age. Tim says, I think that if a child says, don't take that picture, I wouldn't respect any age's opinion. Giorgio says, when the child says no, it's no. Vincent, basically saying age of majority when they pay rent on their own place. And Jonathan says parents should discern on when the child is mature enough for that decision. Yeah, we got a lot of resonation with the legal age. CC Girl says, now, personally, I do respect if they don't want it. I don't put it up. I have 2 stepkids that get that respect. Yeah.
Yeah, like I might take the picture, but it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be put out for people to see.
Right.
If they say no thank you or no. So, yep.
Charlotte says, I try only to share with friends of mine, but my 11-year-old already says when he doesn't want someone to see a picture, and I won't even if I love that picture. I agree with Mark. Yeah, Tim says, one of the things to keep in mind is that ego is fragile at an early age. And that is something that...
Well, at a young age, you could always bribe them with candy, and there you go.
Yeah. So, and this brings up an interesting point, and here's where I could see actual harm coming back to the child, right? So I don't think like this specific example of the photo that we're talking about, I don't think that this would probably be an issue with this. But let's say the kid is in school. Let's say it's somewhere between 5 and 15 years old, and you take a picture of your child and you share it on Facebook, and then your child starts getting bullied by kids at school because maybe it's a goofy picture of your kid doing something that you think is adorable, but kids at school,
it's an embarrassment for them at school. Yeah.
And that's a tough one to deal with, I think, because bullying could come from any reason, any place for any reason. Like it's I don't want to equate bullying with the the pedophilia people we were talking about earlier, but at the same time I feel like you can't live in fear of bullying any more than you can live in fear of walking out the door and possibly having something drop out of the sky and kill you. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know. That was just a thought that occurred to me. I just wanted to throw it out there. Now, it is 7:18. This has really been a wonderful discussion, and I really enjoy everybody's participation and keeping it respectful and the back and forth that we've had here. This has really been a great discussion. I do want to do this giveaway, so let me just get everything set up here, and we will get this bad boy rolling. So, as per usual, if you want... Just making sure everything is properly set up. If you want to try to win the giveaway, all you got to do is enter, and you'll see the instructions in the chat. Enter exclamation point Brewster. Is this working properly? It doesn't appear to be working. There it is. Okay, there we go. Making sure that it was working. Nightbot was sleeping. Nightbot is my helpful friend chatbot. And this is your chance to win either one of my t-shirts or one of my poster prints, winner's choice. You have the next 4 minutes to enter. So at 7, now we'll make it 5 minutes. At 7:24, we'll cut this off. Now, Vincent, type it without the space. Otherwise, it won't include you in the drawing. So we'll make sure Vincent can type it back in. So I want to back up and catch up on the chat here. Peter says in this picture you can't see either person's face, so technically there is no identity visible. I think that's a good point to make here, Peter. If the identity is hidden, I think that makes it even less damaging, because then the child has to explicitly be identified by someone. And in this case, the child is, because all of this backlash came and the woman publicly posted it. But at the same time, like in 10 or even 15 or 20 years, how difficult is it going to be to find that photo and identify it and draw that line? It may be easy, it may not, but having the face there is definitely a measure of protection, which somebody, I think CC Girl, mentioned earlier as well. Mm-hmm. Sandy says, my kids yell at me all the time for posting pictures of them and putting it on Facebook. So she says, then I take it down, which totally understandable. Let's see. Angela says, the thing about bullying is that if somebody wants to bully you, they will find just about any reason to bully you. Angela, that is 100% correct. That
is true. Yeah.
I was a bullied child, and you're right. They didn't need any pictures to bully me. They just bullied me anyway. So
yeah, I was bullied as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I fall on the side of you can't fear that, because they're going to do it if they're going to do it, or they're not if they're not.
But the fuel doesn't need to be there to help, though.
Yeah, this is true. So A-Pit is posting about a 52-week photography challenge. There's a link that he's sharing there. So if you guys want to check that out, feel free to do so. We've got our own monthly challenge going in the Facebook group that we posted earlier, and you're welcome to join our Facebook group if you haven't already. The theme...
Yeah, I'll post the link again.
Thank you, Mark. The theme for the theme for the February challenge is long exposure. I'm really looking forward to the photos that come from this, because I think it's going to be a good...
This will be a fun one.
Yeah, a good set of photos, a real fun. Real fun set of photos, real fun. Yeah. That's another thing that we didn't even talk about that Peter brought up, which is kids posting on Snapchat. Which is a whole different thing. And then there's the whole other thing of when the kids get to the teenage years and then they have their own phones and they start posting their own pictures. They're posting pictures willfully, sometimes that the parents don't want them to post.
Yeah.
And that's a different discussion.
It is on their own accord in that particular case.
It is. Yeah, it is. Let's see. Vincent says there's hardly a kid on the planet that hasn't a picture that could be used to control them as teens. Very, very true.
Yep, true fact. Yep, absolutely.
Uh-huh. Yeah, CC Girl says she got bullied herself as well, but I'm not going to add fuel to the fire either. Right. I mean, I tried to keep a low profile because of that exactly. I didn't want to give them reason to bully me. Mm-hmm. And Anthony says, echoing your words, we just got to be smart about what we post and by now know the potential impact. I think that's really the big takeaway is we all need to be careful and think about what it is we're doing with the images we create and the potential repercussions that they might have. I know when I shouldn't post something, right? Because I'll get like a gut feeling that's like, and then I don't. Like I listen to my gut. You know, that's my measure of, is this okay or is this not okay? And sometimes I want it to be okay. And sometimes I might even hit that post button, and then I'll immediately delete it because I realize that was a bad idea.
That was a bad idea.
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. And that's, you know, and I'm not even just talking about like pictures, because I don't really take pictures of people that could have repercussions, right? Like, I mean, I'm working with models, we're creating concepts, like that kind of thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just, you know, sometimes it's something I type, sometimes it's, you know, something I say in a video, and I edit it out, you know, whatever the case might be. So, yeah. Sandy says it's going to be ugly for the long exposure. She's going to try some astrophotography.
Good for taking up the challenge.
Good for taking up the challenge. CC Girl says she reserves the right to go through any and all electronics that come into my home. And I think as a parent, that's exactly what you should be doing. Like, that's the one thing that I, you know, and again, I'm not a parent, so parents feel free to put me in my place. But I feel that as parents, you got to be responsible for what's happening in your kids' lives, right? Like, that's not something you can offload to the school system or to the daycare system or to whatever else.
The schools don't care anymore anyways, for the most part.
And it's not,
unfortunately.
Yeah. It's not that I'm saying those things can't augment, but as parents, you know, I think we have to be, I mean, I say we, I'm not a parent, but I think as parents, you got to be responsible for your kids.
Yep.
Okay, it is 7:24. I'm going to hit the button. We're going to find out who the winner is here. Let's do it. It is, boom, Matt Petrowski. Welcome. You've won. So, Matt, send me an email to Spyros@selfhelpphotographer.com. I'm going to put this in the chat. Matt?
Congratulations. Is this Matt's first time in the show?
Yeah. I think I've seen Matt before.
Really? Okay.
I'm not sure, but either way, everybody give a big congratulations to Matt. As usual, we'll be doing a giveaway each week. Let me just put my information here in the chat, selfhelpphotographer.com.
Yeah, for those that were late, next week I've got for anyone in the U.S., I've got an iTunes card that I'm going to give away for that's worth $25.
Mm-hmm.
So tune in for next week for that.
Yeah. Now Anthony says I should foster up. For real, my wife and I actually talked about that, but at this point we couldn't foster up because I'd have to tear apart my studio.
Yeah, there's more important things.
I know that sounds terrible, but I mean the house we live in is a small house. It's one bedroom and an upstairs, and the upstairs is my studio space. But
Matt's third show.
Oh, awesome! It's Matt's third show. Fantastic.
So he's sort of new to us. That's good. Glad he's continuing to tune in.
Yeah, absolutely. Super, super cool. Okay, on that note, we do got to wrap this show up because I've got to go, as usual, pick up my wife and get my evening on. But we want to, as always, say thank you to everybody for the wonderful discussion, for hanging out with us tonight. Mark and I really, really appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely.
Anything else you want to add, Mark?
No, I don't think so.
All right. On that note, then, we'll see you guys next week for the next PhotoBlab, and hopefully I'll try to find another discussion topic like this so that we can have these sort of more structured discussions, because I really enjoyed this, and I think it was a fun way to do it and a good way to structure the show. This is growing and changing as we go, so we're always open and welcome to your feedback on the show as well. Feel free to share that with Mark or myself.
Yeah, or if you have a subject you'd like to discuss as well, too.
Absolutely.
Means, we're open.
Yep, we are absolutely open. All right, thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you guys on Friday for the live edit. We'll both see you next week for PhotoBlab. Have a great week. See you somewhere out on the internet. Good night. Get out there. Take some damn photos. Bye.
Night all.
And I got to find all the stop buttons. There's that one.